Referencing is critical to both mixing and mastering. It's really one of the only ways you can know where you're going when it comes to your mixdown and get it to sound like your favorite artist. I want to talk about 4 ways to reference like the pros and how you can set yourself up to make sure that you're referencing properly. Number 1 is to pick an appropriate reference. Obviously, there's so much music out there that you can choose, and there's a couple of factors you should really be thinking about when choosing a reference track. Things like BPM, or the beats per minute of your reference. Is your song way slower or faster? Because that's going to dictate a lot of decisions in the mixing process. Or, for that matter, the sound design of a track, right? Is your reference similar sound design-wise to your original song? Because if they're very different, it might be difficult to match a lot of elements of the mix and the master. And finally, the quality of your reference file. You can utilize sites like Beatport to download high-quality WAV files of songs. That way you're mixing to the final high-quality mix master the artist wanted. Number 2 is to make sure that you have a high-quality A/B setup. Now, for anyone that is confused what A/B means, this is essentially the process of quickly jumping between your reference track and your original song. You don't want to have to wait 2 to 3 seconds by clicking a bunch of buttons in order to hear what the reference sounds like against your original. You want to be able to press one button or one thing that swaps it out so that your ear doesn't have to readjust. Now, there are a ton of plugins out there that can help you with this process, but I'm going to show how you can do this very easily in Ableton Live. I encourage you to look into whatever DAW you have to see if there's a similar quick process or find a plugin that can do this for you. So in Ableton, when you're ready to use a reference track, simply drag your reference onto an empty audio track. The first thing you're going to want to do is go over to the output of that audio track and change it to exterior output. This is going to make sure that that reference track isn't feeding through your mastering chain or any sort of processing you have on your track. The next step is you're going to turn off that track so that it doesn't actually play. And finally, you're going to use key mapping by pressing Command K, clicking on the solo button, clicking any key on your keyboard. I like to do the backslash, and then pressing Command K again. What this does is basically allows you to press backslash and alternate between your reference track and your original track instantaneously. Let's listen to what that sounds like.
But lately we've been shooting shots. And you're not. And maybe even in the middle of the night is blacking out.
What's great about this is you can really hear that instantaneous switch between the 2 tracks, which really helps in fine-tuning mixing and mastering decisions. Number 3 is that you should check target loudness. It's important to know how loud and full sounding your reference track is relative to your track. This dictates a lot of things from how many layers you need going on to how hard you push a limiter. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure you know the average loudness of your reference track to give yourself a game plan of where you're heading. This is super easy to do. You just want to utilize some form of a LUF meter to read out the LUFs in the drop of your reference track. This will give you a good idea of what you should be shooting for in your original song. Finally, number 4 is to check frequency presence. What this means is you really need to analyze your reference and understand the frequencies of that track. This is a great way to know if your song holds up to your reference track in terms of fullness across the entire frequency spectrum. A great way to do this is to analyze the general low end of your reference, the mid-range of your reference, and the high end of your reference. Simply use some sort of frequency splitting plugin to be able to solo these bands. Let's take a listen to the lows, the mids, and the high end of our reference. From here, you can really tell whether or not your track stands up to the reference track for each of these broken down sections. This makes it way easier to analyze and figure out what your song may need in the mix or master. So to summarize the 4 ways to reference like the pros, number 1, we have to pick an appropriate reference. Number 2, high quality A/B setup. Number 3, check the target loudness. And finally, number 4, check the frequency presence of the reference. I promise if you use all of these techniques, you're going to be able to analyze reference tracks better and make your mixes and masters closer sounding to your favorite artists. Be sure to check out our workshops, resources, learning guides, and sample packs. And of course, make sure to scope out our free videos as well.